Hello, and welcome to Jester Jesters Goes Viral, episode 13. Do not move. You move when I tell you to move. Do not fucking move. Hey, welcome to Jester Jesters Goes Viral. I'm your host, Sadie Gibson, and we've got a great show for you today. This show is, we used to meet in the Betsy Trotwood in the basement, and it was sort of a live show where everyone does stand up and people could go up, and anyone could go up and do 5 minutes and just talk to the crowd, and we had a great time. But since COVID happened, we've had to move it online. So now people submit videos or audio up to 5 minutes long, and they get that time to do whatever they want to put on that 5 minutes. In fact, we do not even check it. We don't even see what they uploaded. So if anyone's naked in any of these, it's not our fault. We didn't even check. So yeah, we've got a great lineup of people for you here. Before I start, I would like to talk about sort of a story in my life. I want to know if this was a coincidence. It was a little weird because there was a story in a park by my house, a news story about a guy who was jogging and he got killed. So they found a dead jogger in the park. Kind of freaky. It was just a few days ago. But I was kind of freaked out because I don't know if this was a coincidence, but I was in that park the night before that happened. And I actually saw a jogger. And I saw him coming up, and I was kind of in like a shadowy part. Don't think he could see me. And he ran up on the path, and I kind of stepped out, and then I went up to him, and I stabbed him 57 times. I don't know. Maybe a coincidence. Maybe not. Maybe I'll never find out. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in. Your first comic, or your first video, is Chris Timoney.
Have you submitted anything this week? You have? No, I've got nothing. I've spent the whole weekend writing. Yeah, script. It's... three pages? No, I haven't recorded any of it. No, I don't know what to do. I don't know where the time goes either. Every week. I know, it's knackering. So something about isolation, the struggles of the creative process, easy to do, and gimmicky. And what could that be? It has been a while. Here's a song about the dangers of drinking. When you're out and about and you're having a good time, and you're starting to think you've been drinking too much white wine. You can't remember your middle name is Michael. It's probably not a good idea to cycle, 'cause you're losing your balance as far as you can tell. Is it really any wonder that you fell and give yourself a black eye, a black eye, a black eye, half an eyebrow and scars all over your face? It's a fucking disgrace. So you slap on the Savlon, 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 Sudocreme, dead all over the place, but mostly your face. Then you're sitting at the bar and you're sipping on a whiskey. Ow. And I pop a girl and she's looking quite frisky. Meow. She looks you up and down, then she looks in your eye. Your black eye. Puts a finger on your thigh, and then she says hi. Are you a tough guy? Then you're starting to feel glad that you've got a black eye, a black eye, black eye, half an eyebrow and scars all over your face. It's it's a happy mistake. Then she says, let's go to bed, go to bed, go to bed. Take off your clothes and have sex all over the place. But not in my face, I'm not a dickhead. And I said, baby, 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 maybe this hurts, but I can't keep it up if you stop speeding up. And I wanna spread the news that if it feels this good getting bruised, you can bruise me, bruise me, bruise me, bruise me, until you bruise me up. It ain't the way you're bruising me, but I sure am bruising you. They use to bruise me too. J. Well, I can see it in your eyes that I must leave again. And I can see it in your mouth, you're back with Steve again. Well, there must be some forcible way that I can crowbar him away. Oh, you float like a butterfly, but you sleep with all my friends. When I first laid eyes on you, it threw me like jiu-jitsu, with your lips as full as a man after a Chinese buffet. Very full. Well, your lips sure blew me away. Now I hear the blowing everybody every day. You float like a butterfly, but you sleep with all my friends. And you float with the birds and the bees upon your knees, spreading lots of lovely love like a lovely disease. You might be an evil, beautiful genius, but you're really only leaving lots of room for in between us. So you float like a butterfly, but you sleep with all my float like a butterfly, but you sleep with all my float like a butterfly, but you sleep with all my friends. You ruined my life. Now, in these strange and uncertain times of isolation and creative endeavours leading absolutely nowhere, it's good to just take a step back from the comedy and have a song that's just about the emotion. So I'm going to end on that. Tiny boy trapped in the well. He broke both legs as he fell. He broke both legs chasing his dreams. And when I say dreams, I really mean bees. His legs are broken and he's all alone. He can't get a signal on his phone. Tiny boy, trapped in the well. A little French girl having fun, skipping with a skipping rope in the sun. She hears a yell, but she thinks she's dreaming. And when I mean yell, I really mean screaming. She can't speak English, so he's given up hope. But she's not a monster, so she throws him a rope. Tiny boy, safe and well. Little tiny boy, safe and well. and that little boy and that little girl, they're a lot like you and me. We're practically Siamese, like a pod with two peas, the opposite of chalk and cheese. I saw her today at the reception, a glass of wine in her hand. I knew that she'd meet her connection. At her feet was a footloose man. No, you can't always get what you want. No, you can't always get what you want. No, you can't always get what you want. But if you try sometimes, well, you might just find you get what you need. Fuck you.
And now, Jonathan Hearn.
Dawn had just broken and I was up with the lock. We'd been up all night draining a bottle of scotch like it was a radiator that needed replacing. Larry offered to replace it, but I just told him to beat it. And by that I mean your wings. Yeah, why would I want to stay here when you get like this anyway? It didn't take much for me to get like this. I may be a small bird, but if you overstay your welcome in my territory, I'll attack you. I looked over at the cracked mirror in the corner of my office. I could still feel the impact of the glass in my beak. A case of mistaken identity. After a small sleep, I was up again, but now with a throbbing head. I could have pecked myself. I was due at an appointment in 20 minutes with a young crow called Marion, though she didn't know it yet. I had been hired for a case by her husband, blackmail. Someone was threatening to go public about his, let's say, extra-Marion relations, which naturally he denied. He'd clearly ruffled some feathers higher up the pecking order, and I needed to find out to whom those feathers belonged. As soon as I arrived at the address, my eye spied a pied bird perched alone nearby. "Hello, Mr. Magpie. How's your lady wife?" He took flight before I got my answer, but then my question was rhetorical. This neck of the woods had always been renowned for foul play. Few had the pluck to show up to a place like this. I was going out on a limb turning up at Marion's nest unannounced, but the evening before a nightingale called Rufus had given me the impression she maybe knew something worth knowing. Rufus was to whom I went at the start of every case. Chances are, if you know something, he was the little birdie that told you. Turned out Marion was more than pleasantly met the eye, having at least one close connection to the underworld. Her father was a jailbird who'd been a member of the group known to the Twittersphere as the Corvid-19. They'd brought a pandemic of crime after migrating from overseas, but had been caged some years ago, so I had no reason to suspect her and her father were birds of a feather. I arrived at her nest at feeding time. I could tell just by looking that only one of these screaming kids was hers. She was what the cuckoos called a chick magnet, but what the rest of us called a pushover, on account of all the eggs this parasitic brood had pushed over the edge. "Good morning, ma'am. Marion, right?" "That's right. Who's asking? You're not planning on robbing me, are you?" "I swear I mean you no harm. Please don't get in a flap. I'm a private investigator. I just wanted to ask you some questions about your husband. You know him?" "Ha! Don't expect you catch many worms with a beak like that. Know him? I certainly used to know him." "How long have you known each other, if you don't mind my asking?" 3 seasons. I still remember when we first met. I watched him perform aerobic feats like I'd never seen. Then we shared a kiss." A cloacal kiss? Is there any other kind? Can you think of any bird who might have reason to harm your husband, Marion?
Is he in trouble?
You tell me.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Did your husband ever meet your father or any of his mob? I had a feeling in my bones she wouldn't like people knowing who her father was, and this might get her singing. However, I also knew how hollow those bones could be.
Stone me! You can't just perch there and tweet me like this.
Her crowing had roused the neighborhood. Before I knew it, they were upon me. A flurry of strong wings and long beaks had me tumbling from the branch. I was quick to take flight, and they didn't give chase. I'd got the message they were carrying. The interview hadn't given me anything, but for some reason I smelt a rat, and something about it was fishy. But hey, I quietly thanked them for curing my hangover. Like I always say, it's an aviary out there.
Next up, Declan Kennedy.
Memo to all senior Sky journalists from Glenn Borbag Cadmium, Senior BJ, Sky News. Subject: a bit of friendly tone policing. As you may all be aware, today, Saturday the 13th of June 2020, will see a large-scale protest being staged in central London. Obviously, we want to adhere to the highest standards of integrity and honest journalism. This is a truly historic moment, and all future eras will judge us for decades to come on how we... Just messing with you. Let's just do what we always do, and don't worry, Uncle Rupert will keep us the right side of Ofcom. So you just keep noshing them off, and we'll make sure you're kept in posh suits, movie channel subscriptions, award-winning frontline Our Brave Boys bollocks, and all the resources that will be considered decadent if the BBC did it. Now, just a few words about the coverage, so it can really smear all other protests by association without stepping over that line of impartiality. Now, in describing the demonstration today, we shouldn't just describe it as a demonstration by the far right, because some of the people there are not necessarily far right. That's the same way that some people aren't necessarily fascists. They just happen to have Mein Kampf on their bookcases in the background during a live interview. Or the same way that guns don't necessarily kill people. They just happen to be there when bullets kill people. Or some people have Jeffrey Epstein's phone number in their contacts, etc., etc. You get the idea. We should say it's a counter-demonstration by people who say they're there to protect statues, which includes some far-right groups and military veterans. Now, that last point's very important because it's so essential that we exclude the possibility that you can be a military veteran and left-wing, even though loads of trade unionists went and fought in the Spanish Civil War and indeed World War II. It's also really important that we say that they're there to protect statues as well, because even though statues are incapable of feeling any kind of pain the way a human being is, made to feel pain and don't really mind or care what happens to them, we do want to really push the narrative that somehow tearing them down is like a reverse quantum leap, where we actually go back in time and assassinate Winston Churchill. Actually, someone get on the phone to Scott Bakula, see if we can clear his image for use and drop it in there every now and again. Really hammer that point into the ground. Note also that we should not mention Tommy Robinson, because although he was once going to go, he isn't now, and he has suggested to his supporters that they don't. That's unlike BLM, who, even though they've actually cancelled their protest, we are going to totally ignore and not mention, so that in the public's mind, all protests blur into one and cops have a convenient stick to beat the next peaceful protest with. Peace out, latest dude. I'm going to listen to a Beyonce download now because I have no self-awareness at all. Oi, oi!
Oh, hey, you caught me finishing up knitting this wind turbine. Anyway, your next bit is by Patrick Hearn.
Hi, my name's Patrick Hearn. Well, it's been an interesting week in the news. You're looking at the sign, aren't you? Yeah, I should explain the sign. Firstly, I do not agree with what it says in the sign. I think I put it up when I was drunk. I don't really remember putting it up. I don't really know what I was thinking at the time, but yeah, it's there now, and I'd love to take it down because I can see how you with me next to the sign makes it look like I endorse the views on the sign, which I absolutely don't. I really love David Attenborough, but I can't really take it down because then I'd be erasing history, because I put the sign up in the past, and history is, if anything, about the past. And so, yeah, I'm just going to leave it up there, even though I really disagree with everything the sign says. Because it's a part of our shared history, how the sign got there. I mean, I suppose it's not erasing history in the same way as if you say, for example, destroyed all the records of people who you specifically invited to the country, so that 50 years later on they could be deported, having not had any record of how they arrived. I mean, that would be erasing history, because you're actually erasing the documentation that historians use to do their work. Or if you had, just to make something off the top of my head, sort of records of war crimes and concentration camps set up by the British in Africa. Yeah, if you destroyed those records as some sort of legacy operation, then that would be destroying history, because like how is anyone going to know about it, because these records weren't public, and then if you got something which isn't public and then you destroy it before historians have really had a chance to study it, then that's really destroying history. That's actually erasing like events from the collective memory. I suppose with the sign, like this video kind of tells you everything you need to know about that. Like if I did take down the sign, we can still remember what was on the sign, and we've got this video as a record of what the sign looked like. If anyone wants to do research on that, and a little bit of the story about how the sign got there. But I suppose the sign being there itself didn't actually do anything. So yeah, maybe that's a good decision actually. I'm kind of okay with that. It was, we got rid of that sign which said something about David Attenborough, which, as I remember, I didn't agree with. That's difficult actually. Oh shit! Yeah. No, I definitely don't agree with what was on the sign. I think, if anything, I think the opposite. I mean, he's an old man now. I think it was the right choice. Well, it's been good to see this week the government have announced bubbles. Everyone loves bubbles. There's a lot of bubbles being thrown around, so I don't really understand the full thing. But as far as I get it, it means that I've been updated from celibate to potentially monogamous, which is great news. And the bubble, I think, is, when they're saying the bubble, that's the reservoir at the end of a prophylactic. And what they're saying is that we're now allowed to use those, which is fantastic, because eventually those go out of date.
Finally, Paul Thomas Burke.
The worst thing about social distancing is that it's set at 2 meters between encounters. Personally, I'd be happier if they increased that to 2 years. I'm not a people person in the same way that I'm not a morning person. There's nothing that you're going to say before lunch that couldn't wait until after dinner. So, all that said, it would be safe to assume that I live on my own and work for myself, which would be true, or at least used to be. Currently, I'm living in Ireland with my mum, who 15 years ago changed jobs and retrained as a grandmother, and she now spends the day manning a phone line to other grannies, talking about cats, grandchildren, flowers, the weather, and the last conversation they each had with the previous granny about the same thing, which is surprisingly intense. It's like a live action version of Flock wallpaper. We're well out of town, so the only thing that interrupts our day now are the cats bringing back another example of a dying species. If your dog brought back a half-dead kitten for a nice little game of torture, you would choke it to death on its own lead. We had 3 confirmed kills in one day, which means that we're feeding fluffy little serial killers, especially the big one. She's got super soft fur, so when she stretches out in the ground, it's just like a bath mat with claws. Luckily, we have been able to save some birds. During the week, a cat brought down a nest with chicks in it, and we collected them all before they were hurt. And I drove them to a lady in Northern Ireland who lives in Enniskillen, who will take on young birds and feed them and nurse them until they can fly. On the drive there, I realised that I'd actually been that way before. When I was a kid, me and my cousins had been taken to watch a football match, and at one point we were held in traffic at a checkpoint, And in the eternity that is the waiting scale of a teenager, I realised that perpendicular to the car was a ditch that separated the fields. As I stared out, I slowly began to see that all along the ditch were heavily camouflaged British soldiers aiming their guns at us. Now in my head, I knew I was an English kid wearing an island top, but this was the early 90s and I was too young to understand the health implications of wearing polyester and the fact that the border wasn't so frictionless. When I gave the fledglings to the lady, I asked if they would be okay, seeing that they'd been taken from the nest so young. But she reassured me and said that within days they'd be feeding themselves, and soon after they'd be flying, and within a matter of weeks they will migrate. They'll fly thousands of miles, they'll cross continents, and they'll know exactly what to do and where to go. On the drive back, I thought about how much the world has changed since then, and how the days of ignorance and bigotry are gone, which is good, because I didn't feel so confident about the chicks. Who is she kidding? All birds are terrible with directions.
And that's our show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to be involved in the following weeks, we do this every single Monday at 8 p.m. So by Sunday night, you can get us a video or audio clip and we will put it in. So send that to Jester Jesters. info at jesterjesters.com. Send that to info at jesterjesters.com. We used to take donations in a bucket when we did our live show, but since it's online now, if you feel like donating, you can go to jesterjesters.com and donate there. That's jesterjesters.com. So yeah, that's our show. Thank you very much. Tune in next week, and Jonathan Hearn will be hosting, and I hear that he will be eating a large amount of something very mysterious. Thank you, and good night. I told you not to fucking move!